as I think about the evolution of my learning to teach, the gathering of information and so forth, I'm reminded again of what Starker said: future generations stand on our shoulders, and we stand on those who precede us. And I've had many wonderful, wonderful influences, both people and places that I've taught, and students that have inspired me and challenged me in teaching cello and chamber music and music in general. And one of the things that I found was a great weakness with me was trying to get out of being doctrinaire and working only with technical things. I got so involved in my own mind with solving technical problems because musical things came very easily for me. And I felt that the technical side of things was the most important and all-standing thing. And the result of that was that often, rather than simply guiding students, I tended to push them, which is not the most productive thing to do. That aside, and I'll get into those more specifically later because they're kind of humorous, I'm thinking of cello, chamber music, and music in general. And my first influence was during my college years at the University of Kansas with Raymond Stuhl, who gave me a basic foundation, basic repertoire, basic etudes, scales, solo repertoire, and there came a time when I really practiced hard and was able to take advantage of what he had to offer. Most important with him was the love of beauty, ethics, and the glorification of hard work. I mean, it's extremely important, particularly for somebody who was as green as I was, coming from where I came from, where there was no real background in classical music and no way to get a lot of good training prior to college. Anyway, that was my foundation. And after I went to his lessons, I also remember, and this goes back to another part of teaching, which is communication and understanding the point of view of the student, psychology. I took a psychology course in undergraduate school at the University of Kansas from a man called E. Thayer Gaston, who invented music therapy. And it was a brilliant course, and it made me realize that you simply can't talk at people. You have to work with them where they are. And that was extremely important to me. I went from KU to the University of Indiana, of course, studied with Starker. And with Starker, just a large bunch of things came to light. Mostly from Starker, I learned to analyze. I learned to observe. With Starker, I learned so much just by watching him play. He played a lot in my lessons, sometimes discouraging me a lot because it seemed so effortless, and actually was effortless. And I wanted to learn how to be that comprehensive in the approach to the instrument. Anyway, with him I learned to analyze. He gave me certain daily exercises. He wrote a book subsequently called the organized method of cello playing, which I was introduced to in a spiral notebook that he had in pencil. And he said, "Alan, don't ever buy this book. Just get in position, wiggle everything, and then do double stops and wiggle everything that's left over, and then do position connection exercises, and you can play the cello." That was silly, of course, and nonetheless, it opened my eyes to the fact that things could be solved. So he assigned few etudes and no scales, as I think I might have said in another segment of this, but used in-position exercises and position connection exercises, which are really very important, no question about it. In retrospect, and I can't remember when this was recorded, there was a recording that he made years and years ago called The Road to Cello Playing, which for the last several years I've applied to some of my students. And it's an array of cello etudes, from the most simple to the most fiendish. And he plays them immaculately. And it's, again, something I would recommend right now. After Indiana University, I think I've mentioned, I taught at Inter-American University in Puerto Rico, which was another sort of thing. It was learning to communicate. Communication certainly is everything with regard to teaching. After Inter-American University, I was invited to go to Ohio Wesleyan University in Delaware, Ohio. And there, I started my teaching of cello on a daily basis. And it was while I was in Delaware, Ohio, that I really discovered Suzuki. Shinichi Suzuki was an enormous influence on me. He, of course, was basically German trained, but he was an absolute genius in communicating with people and a saint in his approach. And he's been, over the years, really, his method has been really abused. But nurtured by love, I would recommend anybody read, and anything else that about Suzuki or things that he wrote, because it was he was terribly important. A lot of his students who came here had terrible time adjusting, and it's really too bad. It was at a difficult time. After Ohio Wesleyan University, I went to Eastman School, which of course was very, very challenging. The level of student was very high, and I had a large teaching load, but my major influences started out with a doctor of pathology. His name is Bernard Panner. And he was a doctor at the Strong University Medical Center. And I taught him, and he taught me. He referred me to articles. He referred me to books. He said, study Gray's Anatomy, just to find out how the body works. Because prior to that, Starker instinctively knew how things worked, but it wasn't as perfectly clear as it could be. And from Bernie Panner, I learned so much. And that was in the mid-60s, for heaven's sake, 65, 66. And just 2 years ago, I saw him in a Jewish home where we played. In addition to Bernie, I discovered Galamian teaching through Ronald Leonard. The book, scales and arpeggios, rhythms and bowings, things of that sort, invaluable in teaching. And I was also exposed to Leonard Rose through Ron Leonard. And that led me to use scales, arpeggios, a lot in the teaching, as well as really feeding etudes to people. And it's really very, very, very important. At that time also, I met Suzuki and watched him teach, and it was absolutely amazing. At that time also, since I had students of this caliber, I really began to explore the scope of etude material and repertoire and so forth, sort of familiarize myself with what I was teaching. In addition to that, I really got into chamber music teaching and learned from watching and learned from doing. From Eastman, it was the Cleveland Institute of Music. David Cerrone was a Galamian student, and so I learned a lot from him as far as teaching is concerned. Galamian was extremely rigorous and dry and very, very effective. I also learned from Don Weilerstein because he was a wonderful colleague there. Fritz Mogg did some master classes for me. He was a teacher at Indiana University, an absolute wonderful player and pedagogue. In 83 to 87, I was at Northwestern University, and a major influence there was Alice Branfenbrenner, a doctor at the Northwestern University Hospital. And we formed a kind of a partnership and started a kind of injury of musicians clinical approach. And we used sports medicine people, had many seminars, learned many, many things about the vulnerable parts of the body and why we get hurt. We have often diagnosed overuse syndrome, and I found much of the time it's not so much overuse as it is misuse. And from these sports doctors and so forth, we were able to learn an awful lot about how technically to approach the instrument through structure and motion. We then went back to CIM, continued to grow, continued to teach, and from here, it's colleagues and my students stimulated me and helped me to learn. And from back to CIM, I came back to the Eastman School of Music in 1999. And I would say that the bulk of my evolution occurred prior to the 1990s. But I hope I still continue to learn. I said at the beginning that I was rigid, and I can remember giving a few lessons to Allie Weilerstein. I absolutely had no idea how to approach her. She was so uniquely involved in cello playing, and it was very hard to see where it was going to go. She subsequently studied with Richard Weiss and did very well, and he was a good guide for her. Another one was very funny, was Mark Kossauer. He studied with me at Aspen when he was pretty young, I don't know, 13 or 14. He's now principal cello in Cleveland. And in the last few years, we've exchanged some amusing texts, both of us embarrassed about how ineffective our coupling up was, because he was very precocious, but at that time I couldn't figure out where to go next and how to really encounter him. Those are two of the more amusing incidents where I just didn't quite know what to do. Certainly there were others, but by and large, I think the most important thing was that I tried to figure out where the student was coming from. I tried to figure out what made them tick, how they related to their environment. In subsequent segments of this, we'll talk about more specific things as far as the technical approach is concerned.